According to our plan today, we will work on chapter 3 or topic 3, according to CIE specifications 2023, which is related to movement of substances into or out of the cells. When you have any question of any kind, don't hesitate to ask me. I will go through all of the PowerPoint presentation quickly, then we will work on the exam of today. The first part related to diffusion and the definitions of diffusion and some terminology. As I told you guys in the exam, it's not an English test. He is here not to check your vocabulary skills, but you have to add a lot of terminology to your answer. So let's first of all define diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to area of low concentration. So usually diffusion happened everywhere in biology, in chemistry, in physics. Gases diffuses without partially permeable membrane. Particles usually has an amount of kinetic energy, so it has an ability to move, and this movement will be from high concentration to low concentration. So diffusion happened everywhere: diffusion of gases, diffusion of chemical substance, diffusion of water vapor, because as you know well, water vapor is a gas and it diffuses from stomata, guard cells outside to the atmosphere. In front of you, an example of diffusion or the movement from high concentration to low concentration. And let's understand the word diffusion or the concentration gradient. The scientific term concentration gradient, it means the movement from high to low. So when I'm saying molecules diffuse down a concentration gradient, so particles will move from point A to point B. When I'm saying molecules diffuses up a concentration gradient, this means the movement will be from low to high concentration, and this is another type of movement of particles. But now let's talk about diffusion down a concentration gradient from high to low concentration. It's important in the exam to add the word concentration gradient or movement from high to low concentration. So there are more particles at point A than at point B, and the particles will diffuse between the 2 points. So the word concentration gradient is the difference in concentration between two regions or two different areas. Again, diffusion is the net movement of particles from high concentration to low concentration or down concentration gradient. When I'm saying from high to low, this means this type of movement doesn't require energy, doesn't consume energy at all. I will give you another example. I'm always saying this example in my classes. When we have two classes, one class contains 50 students and the other class contains 5 students only. Do you think it's easy or it's easier for students in the class of 50 to move to the class of 5 students, or the opposite? Definitely movement will be from high concentration class to low concentration class, from the high capacity group to the low capacity group. So movement will be always from high to low concentration, doesn't require energy at all. This is an example of the movement of particles or how particles diffuses across a membrane. Look at the example in front of you. If we have a membrane here called partially permeable membrane. Partially permeable, it means it has an ability to select what molecule will pass from high to low concentration. So in this model, we are demonstrating the cell and cell structure. The partially permeable membrane is like the membrane in between the cells. So this membrane moves particles from high to low concentration until what? Until reach the dynamic equilibrium when the particles became in both sides exactly the same. In the model in front of you, we have water molecules represented by blue balls and molecules of potassium iodide represented by the yellow particles, okay, or I'm sorry, the watery solution represented by the baby blue color, the copper sulfate particles by blue ball, and the potassium iodide particles by yellow balls. Look, the concentration at the beginning in the right side, we have more copper sulfate, and in the left side, we have more potassium iodide. Particles, as we said in the first slide, has kinetic energy, has an ability to move in between the permeable membrane until it reach the equilibrium here on this side. Okay, this is called equilibrium. After a while, it will change in concentration again, and it will return back to move and so on. So movement is consistently happen until reach the dynamic equilibrium in the cell. What are the factors affect the rate of diffusion? Definitely, the first factor was temperature. As temperature increases, the rate of diffusion increases. If I have a drop of any blue liquid or stain, it will diffuse faster among the solution of high concentration. Like if we have a water at 70 degrees Celsius, definitely the particles will diffuse faster. Okay, because of what? Because of the kinetic energy, Yamalak. So we have high kinetic energy, or the kinetic energy is extremely high when we have high temperature. So molecules will colloid faster, will move faster, and particles will diffuse faster as well. The second factor is the diffusion distance, and it makes sense, Hamza. The shorter the diffusion, the faster the rate of diffusion, the shorter of the distance, I mean, the faster the rate of diffusion. If we have less diffusion distance, this means the molecules will move faster or will diffuse faster. There is no need to go through the example, but actually, you know, well, if we have a potato cylinder, it will turn blue-black if it is really thin when we are testing this with the iodine. So the rate of diffusion is slower across longer diffusion distance. What is the importance of studying diffusion, Ahmed? Diffusion is extremely important to understand how gases are diffused or gas exchange process happen in the alveoli. How water molecules, how minerals and gases moves across the membrane in the cell. I know well that minerals diffuses um, by active transport, and we know that mineral diffuses by active transport, but oxygen diffuses into the root cell by diffusion or simple diffusion. So for the lungs contains alveoli, which has a very thin membrane. When we have thin membrane and difference or concentration gradient, as we said, between oxygen and carbon dioxide, definitely molecules will diffuse and gases will diffuse and exchange easily. So الاكزامبل يا ولاد بتاع الالفيولاي هو the best example to represent diffusion and the rate of diffusion. عندي sac والsac دي coated by a lot of blood supply and area containing carbon dioxide, area containing oxygen, according to the concentration, movement will be really fast. The example of root hair cell, oxygen will diffuse into the root hair cell, and this movement happened by diffusion, or this diffusion based on the diffusion distance and one of the factors. Carbon dioxide diffuses out of the root hair cell, so also this is a real example of diffusion. Another molecule or factor, which is the surface area to volume ratio. Look, we took this example to understand that as we have large organism or large cube like this one, what will happen is the surface area to volume ratio will be small. So definitely, as the surface area to volume ratio will be small, diffusion will be harder. So the greater the area per unit volume, or the surface area to volume ratio is high or great, this means that the rate of diffusion of substance will be faster. Let's go through this example to understand. If we have 3 cubes, and the 3 cubes represent the cells, cell A, cell A2, and cell A3. I gave you an example of the calculation. How did we calculate the surface area and volume of a cube? And we got the ratio, surface area to volume ratio. We found that for small organism, there is a high surface area to volume ratio. يعني the relationship between the surface area and volume ratio is somehow balanced. عندي surface area اللي بيcover specific volume is okay. So وكأني بالظبط بقول لك المساحة اللي بتكفر الأورجانيزم ده مدياله ability إن هو يدفيوز الموليكيولز faster. On the other side لو بصينا يا حمزة for this cell هتلاقي لا surface area is extremely small in comparison with the volume, with the amount. As you know, the volume is the amount of the cell. So definitely we need support in order to diffuse particles, because particles will diffuse slower on those kind of cells or organisms. دايما بستخدم البوينت دي يا ولاد مش لما بتكلم على الماث سكيلز ولا calculations، لكن دايما بستخدم البوينت بتاعت السيرفيس اريا to volume ratio when he's giving you a huge mammal and مثلا for example a mouse. وبيبدأ يcompare the rate of diffusion. So you should implement this factor. You should talk about the surface area to volume ratio. Okay, the increase in surface area is not as much as the increase in volume. So surface area to volume ratio decreases, and this affects the rate of diffusion. This is another way to represent the rate of diffusion, or how this factor affects the rate of diffusion. And definitely you can relate. If we are talking about X, for example, it can carry out the activities like growth efficiently, because all of the molecules will diffuse faster. Look at Y, Hamza. What will happen here that X and Y have similar volume, but in comparison with the surface area of cell A, لا الcell هنا surface area to volume ratio is somehow smaller. For cell A3, surface area to volume ratio is the smallest one. يبقى definitely less food and less oxygen will be delivered compared to X, and definitely compared to Y. يبقى الكونكلوجن من الديفينيشن من الفاكتور ده ايه يا ولاد؟ انه as long as we have large surface area. وبليز يا احمد ما تبقاش confused. انا بقول لك if you have large surface area to volume ratio, this means انه الموليكولز will diffuse faster. السيل هتقدر to carry out all of the activities faster. اوعوا يا اولاد تتلخبطوا وتكتبوا large surface area وتسكتوا. اوعوا تكتبوا large volume وتسكتوا. افتكروا كده once ان انت you wrote surface area، كمل الانسر بتاعتك يا احمد واكتب surface area to volume ratio. خلينا ناخد example هنا انه ازاي some cells has been adapted in order to increase the surface area for absorption. طبعا example now is extremely simple because this is the third time that we revised on the syllabus using this study plan. بس خلينا نقول برضو انه some cells has been adapted زي بالظبط الvilli of the lumen or the small intestine has this kind of folds or protrusions or convolution structure or convoluted structure in order to increase the surface area and surface area to volume ratio. Consequently, the absorption will increase. Okay, the second type is the osmosis, which is the same, exactly the same as diffusion, but for water molecules only. So in this type, we will focus on water and movement of water molecule only. Look at the initial setup and after osmosis, what happened? Particles of water moved from area of high concentration to area of low concentration through partially permeable membrane. Very important to add this in your definition, guys, because the definition of osmosis might come out of 2 or 3 marks in your paper. Out of 2 marks, if he asked, you can definitely write the net movement of water molecules from high water potential to low water potential, high concentration to low concentration. And my advice in year 10 to write high water potential to low water potential, because this is an extended definition, extended terminology. So please write from high water potential to low water potential through partially permeable membrane or across partially permeable membrane. If it is 3 marks definition, Malak, we will write definitely this type of movement or this type of diffusion doesn't require energy, doesn't use energy in a form of ATP in the cell. Okay, so to cut it short, water molecules diffuses from test tube B or side B to side A because A has a lower water potential than B. So the definition, as we said now several times, it is the diffusion or the net movement of water. If you did not write water, I'm sorry, you will lose mark across partially permeable membrane. I will talk about this model because you will find this model in all of the paper 6 or paper 4 exams. So very important to understand this model. Here we are demonstrating the partially permeable membrane by dialysis tubing or Vesking tubing. So this Vesking tubing or dialysis tubing, both are right, represents the cell membrane. And we will decide what molecules will move from high to low concentration depends on the question itself. For some questions, movement will occur from the solution to the dialysis tubing. And from some questions, diffusion will happen from dialysis tubing to the test tube. So please be smart, and there is no need to memorize, and there is no need to be highly stick to specific type of questions. It depends on the question, guys. So if you have big, large molecules, Hamza, in the Vesking tubing, no problem at all. Movement will happen from the solution in the test tube to the Vesking tubing. If you have small molecules in the dialysis tubing, so it will pass easily, it will diffuse easily. So I cannot say specific rule for this kind of experiment, but what I can say or can admit that we found this experiment frequently among different exam series. This part is an extended part, which is the part of high water potential to low water potential, as we said. Okay, so the word water potential or this term is important to be added for your paper in year 10. Okay, what happens to a plant cell in a solution with a higher concentration of water? Look, guys, we need to apply what we understand about osmosis and movement of particles on the living cell, like plant cell and animal cell. Let's start from here. If we have specific, from the middle, I mean, if we have a normal plant cell, like this kind of plant cell, look at and follow the sequence 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we placed this cell in a solution with high concentration of water. So this solution has a high concentration of water or high water potential. What will happen? What will happen if we have high water potential solution? Movement, we will change nothing, ya Hamza. We will change nothing. Movement, as we said, will be from high water potential solution to low water potential solution. So if we have higher concentration of water or higher water potential in the solution, the cell will be purged. So water will move to the cell sap because cell has lower concentration of water or lower water potential, and the cell is said to become turgid. Turgid, it means it expands or swells, and very important to say turgid. I will accept in your explanation cell expands or cell swelling, but one of the supplement terminology is turgid. So if it is 4 marks question, ya Ahmed, don't be panicked. You will write about the movement of water from high water potential to low water potential by osmosis through partially permeable membrane, and cell will be turgid. The turgidity of the cell wall, or when the cell wall become really rigid and prevent the cell of being pressed, this is called turgor. Turgor pressure is important because the pressure exerted by water on the cell wall, or the water in the vacuum on the cell wall, called turgor pressure. So imagine. تعرفوا يا اولاد امتى هبقى عارف ان انا خدت الفول مارك في الانسر؟ لما الاقي نفسي كاتب a lot of scientific terms in my answer، مش لما الاقي نفسي كاتب كتير. قلت لكم several times و this is my way انه it's not a vocabulary test, it's not an English test، بس انا بتشيك الترمينولوجي. يبقى انت يا ملك هتبقي عارفه انك جبتي الفول مارك في اي question لما تعرفي، لما تبقي فاهمه كويس قوي how many scientific terms you implemented in your answer وكاتباها صح ولا ايه. طيب so does this happen in animal cell؟ بس للاسف الانيمال cell ما عندهاش cell wall, so cell will expand and bursts if it take more water or if we put the cell in a high concentration of water solution. So this is an example of absorption or taking in water across a partially permeable membrane in the normal red blood cells, and cell swells and bursts. Okay, so I'm sorry to say, the problem happened and cell eventually die because cell has been damaged. If we have a solution with the same water potential, so definitely there is no change because water will move from high concentration to low concentration. Here, if you understand the previous slide, we are talking about the opposite. What happens to a plant cell in a solution with a lower concentration of water? What will happen here is that the cell will shrink and become flaccid. Flaccid or plasmolized, it means the cell shrink, detached from the cell wall. Why? Because we removed all of the water or the majority of water from high concentration inside the cell to low concentration outside. So if we placed the cell in a solution with low water potential, then the cell sap, definitely movement will happen from the cell to outside, and the cell shrink in size and becomes flaccid. This shrinkage of cytoplasm and cell membrane or detach of the cytoplasm and the cell membrane from the cell wall is called plasmolysis, and the cell is said to be plasmolized. Okay, so the cell shrinks or plasmolized. Can we change, يا أحمد, الcell to the normal, or can we return it to the normal shape? Yes, by placing the cell into high water potential solution. That's what will happen to the animal cell, guys. So when we placed the animal cell in a low water potential solution, so movement will happen from the cell to outside, and cell will shrink in size, and definitely the cell will be dehydrated and eventually die. Very important to talk about turgor pressure in plants, or how it is important. Look, when we are talking about the stomata and the guard cells, turgor in guard cells causes stomata to open. So when we have more water inside the guard cell, this means that the stomata will be open and gas diffuses faster, water diffuses faster, and so on. If we have less water in the guard cell, so stomata will be closed and plasmolysis causes the cell to be flaccid. So changes in the turgor of the guard cell control the opening and close of the guard cell. So it controls the movement of water vapor, gases from any type of cells. So it's actually controlling the transpiration rate. So it is extremely important to know the effect of turgor pressure and turgor on the guard cell. So now we read the comparison between diffusion and osmosis, and I think there is no need to take time on this comparison in the definition. I will keep it in front of you just to make sure that everything is totally perfect. The last part of this topic is the active transport. Active transport, I already changing this slide, guys, because as I told you, the objective slide is really important during studying time. So after finishing the explanation and after studying this part, please, please, please go over the objectives to make sure that you have covered all of the objectives in this part. Okay? Active transport is the opposite process. So diffusion is a passive transport. Osmosis is a passive transport of water, but active transport is the movement of particles through a cell membrane from high concentration to low concentration. From low concentration to high concentration. This process, like same example يا ملك، لو أنا عندي class with 5 students, will 5 students دول wants to go to the class of 50 students. Do you think that we need to exert an effort or force or energy in order to push 5 students to enter the class of 50 students or not? Definitely yes. So the movement of particles require energy in this part. This happens through cell membrane and some protein channels in the cell membrane. So it is from low concentration to high concentration. Okay, it happens, as we said, for the mineral ions. It occurs only in the living cells because when we have respiration, we have energy, and we can use this energy in order to move specific particles. Look at the mineral ions. Mineral ions are a lot in plant cell, but still plant cells needs more mineral ions from the soil. So movement will be from low concentration to high concentration in order to move through all of the cells or different parts of the plant tissue. This is the protein channel or the carrier protein, and it acts like a rotating disk to take some molecules, moving molecules from low concentration to high concentration, from low concentration area to high concentration area. Without this type of protein, some molecules cannot pass easily through the cell membrane. Now, we have covered everything in this topic, and this is the concept mapping in order to make sure that you have covered everything during this topic. Next video will be related to biological molecules and enzyme activity, and this will be uploaded tomorrow, guys. Okay.